The night sky of Arden was calm before the storm. The stars shone brightly, and people in the city below lived their normal lives. Children played in the streets, shopkeepers closed their stalls, and families prepared for dinner. Nobody expected that their world was about to change forever. High above the clouds, strange shadows appeared. At first, people thought they were passing meteors or maybe a new kind of starship. But as the shapes grew larger and darker, fear spread across the land. They were not meteors. They were ships, enormous in size and unlike anything humans had built. Their surfaces were black as coal, shining faintly under the light of Arden's twin moons. Soon, the sound came. It was not thunder, though it shook the sky. It was the hum of alien engines, deep and endless, like a storm that never ended. The ground trembled as the fleet descended, blotting out the stars. People ran into their homes, locking doors and shutting windows. Soldiers rushed to their stations, but even their hands shook. From the largest ship, a figure emerged. She stood at the center of a grand platform, her form tall and sharp. She was the alien vampire queen, feared across many galaxies. Her armor shimmered like liquid night, and her eyes glowed red as burning coals. She had conquered dozens of worlds before this night. Every species that had stood in her way had fallen. She did not need to speak. Her presence alone sent terror through the air. Arden's leaders tried to send a message of peace. They broadcasted a signal, asking what the queen wanted, offering trade and alliance. But no answer came. Instead, beams of light shot down from her fleet. Whole districts of the city turned to fire. Towers crumbled, streets burned, and thousands fled screaming. The queen had spoken through destruction. The humans on Arden were not weak, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Their weapons fired into the sky, but the alien shields absorbed every shot. Jets soared upward only to be crushed by beams of energy. The defense forces fell back within minutes. Fear grew like wildfire. The name of the vampire queen spread from mouth to mouth, and everywhere it was spoken, hope faded. Still, some tried to fight. A squad of soldiers in the western city gathered courage and launched rockets, striking one of the smaller alien ships. For a moment, the people cheered. But then the queen herself descended, her shadow sweeping across the ground. With a wave of her hand, the rockets turned to ash, and the soldiers collapsed as though their very life had been drained away. The cheers ended in silence. In villages beyond the city, people packed what little they could carry. Families filled transport ships, trying to escape before the fleet closed the skies. Roads filled with endless lines of frightened faces, parents carrying children, old men leaning on canes, and young women guiding their families. Every voice asked the same question: who could stand against such power? The answer, for now, was no one. Even the bravest warriors looked at the queen and felt their courage vanish. She was not only strong, she was ancient. Legends said she had ruled for centuries, perhaps even longer. To fight her was to fight the very shadow of death itself. The planet of Arden, once full of light, now lay under a cloak of fear. Fires burned in the distance, ships hovered like vultures in the sky, and the alien queen stood watching with cold eyes. To her, Arden was just another prize, another world to crush and drain. But somewhere among the frightened masses, one man did not run. He was not known as a hero, nor did he carry the highest rank. He had no great riches or famous name. Yet, as the queen spread terror and the people fled, his eyes held a different fire. While others looked only at the sky in fear, he looked at the ground beneath his feet and decided this was his home, and he would not give it up. That man's name was Ryan, and though no one knew it yet, the fate of Arden and perhaps the future of humanity itself would rest in his hands. The fall of Arden's capital city spread fear across the whole planet. Survivors who had escaped the first attack carried stories wherever they went. They spoke of burning towers, collapsing bridges, and soldiers falling without even being touched. Above all, they spoke of the alien vampire queen, whose very presence crushed the spirit of anyone who saw her. In every town and every village, the name of the queen was whispered in fear. Mothers held their children close, and fathers stared at the horizon, knowing they could not protect their families from such an enemy. Even the strongest leaders and most experienced soldiers began to doubt. It seemed no weapon could harm her, no plan could stop her, and no army could resist her. On the southern plains, whole settlements packed their belongings and fled toward the starports. Long lines of people moved like rivers of despair. Some carried only what they could hold in their hands. Others abandoned their homes, leaving doors open and fires still burning in the hearths. Everywhere, people believed the same thing: survival was only possible by running away. Inside the military command center of Arden, the officers tried to find hope. Maps of the planet glowed on large screens. They marked the cities already destroyed, the regions already occupied by alien ships, and the paths of fleeing refugees. Every update made the room quieter. Every report carried more bad news. The commanders looked at each other, and though their mouths spoke of strategies, their eyes showed fear. "The Queen cannot be fought," one officer said in a heavy voice. "We must retreat with as many civilians as possible." Another officer argued, "If we abandon Arden, humanity loses not only a planet but also our courage. We must resist." But resistance seemed like an empty word. Reports showed that energy cannons did nothing. Rockets exploded harmlessly against alien shields. Ground troops were drained of life before they could even raise their weapons. The Queen moved faster than the eye could follow. She seemed untouchable. Rumors spread quickly among the soldiers. Some claimed she could turn invisible. Others said she could enter dreams and plant fear before battle even began. Many soldiers simply refused to fight. They abandoned their posts, joined the refugees, and left the defense lines thin. In the city of Turin, a group of civilians gathered in the marketplace. An old man told them, "Do you not understand? She feeds on fear itself. The more we tremble, the stronger she becomes." But the people did not believe him. They saw no choice but to escape. Even those who once spoke bravely now lowered their heads. The will to fight was fading across Arden. Meanwhile, the Queen moved with calm confidence. She walked through ruins as though she were visiting her own garden. The air grew cold where she passed, and the light seemed to dim. Her followers, strange creatures from distant worlds, marched behind her in silence. They needed no orders, for they knew her power was absolute. She did not hurry, for she knew no one could challenge her. To her, Arden was already hers. But in one small corner of the planet, far from the command centers and refugee lines, a man named Ryan remained. He watched the fear spread like a disease, and his heart grew heavy. He was only one man, but he could not accept that his world would be given away without resistance. He remembered the old stories of humanity, how humans had survived endless wars, how they had endured storms, famines, and disasters, and how they had always risen again. Ryan thought of those who had fled. He did not blame them. Fear was natural. But he also knew that fear was not the end. Fear could be faced. Fear could be challenged. And if no one else would try, then he would. As night fell, Ryan walked through the empty streets of his town. Houses stood silent, doors open, belongings left behind. The wind carried the smell of smoke from distant cities. He passed the school where children once laughed, the fields where farmers once worked, and the small shop where he had bought supplies for his family. All were abandoned. It felt as if the spirit of humanity itself was slipping away. But inside Ryan, something different stirred. The more he saw of fear, the stronger his resolve became. He whispered to himself, "If we surrender to fear, then we are already defeated. If we stand, even one of us, then hope is not gone." Far above, the alien fleet floated like dark clouds. Lights flickered across their hulls, and strange signals echoed through the air. The Queen's eyes turned toward the land below, sensing resistance somewhere in the darkness. She smiled faintly, for to her, one human meant nothing. Yet she would soon learn that humans were not like the others she had conquered. Humans did not stay broken forever. Ryan stood alone under the night sky, watching the fleet, his hand resting on his weapon. He was only one man, but he felt the weight of his people's courage resting on his shoulders. Fear had swept across Arden, but he would not let it drown him. While others ran, he prepared to stand. The story of Arden was not yet finished. While fear spread across Arden like fire, one man refused to let it consume him. His name was Ryan. He lived a simple life before the invasion, working in the fields, repairing machines, and helping his neighbors. He was not a commander, not a great leader, and not a famous soldier. Yet something inside him would not allow him to run when everyone else did. Ryan watched as families boarded transport ships, their faces pale with worry. He saw soldiers leaving their posts, their weapons thrown aside in defeat. Even his closest friends begged him to leave. "Ryan, we cannot fight this enemy," one of them pleaded. "You must come with us. There is no hope here." But Ryan shook his head. "If we all run, then Arden is already lost. Someone must stand, someone must fight." His words did not change their minds. They left, disappearing into the endless stream of refugees. Ryan stood alone on the platform as the last ship lifted into the sky. He watched until its light faded, then turned toward the silent streets. He had made his choice. Ryan's home was small, but inside it he kept a few tools, weapons, and old gear. He laid everything on the table and studied it carefully. A worn rifle, its barrel scratched from years of use. A simple blade, sharp but not shining. Small explosives, handmade from scavenged parts. None of these looked powerful enough to fight the Queen, yet he believed in using every resource he had. Humans had always survived by being clever, not only strong. As he worked, memories filled his mind. He remembered stories told by his grandfather, stories of old wars when humans were outnumbered but never surrendered. He remembered how his father once told him that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to act in spite of it. Those words gave him strength now. The night grew darker, and the sounds of the alien fleet echoed in the distance. Strange lights flickered across the horizon, and the ground shook with the weight of machines moving closer. Ryan knew the Queen's forces were spreading, searching, and consuming. If no one resisted, the whole planet would fall within days. He strapped on his gear and stepped outside. The streets of his town were empty, yet he did not feel alone. He carried the spirit of those who once lived there, the laughter of children, the voices of friends, the strength of his people. That spirit gave him purpose. Ryan began walking toward the ruined city where the Queen had landed. The journey was long and dangerous. He crossed empty roads, past abandoned villages, and moved through forests where the night air was filled with smoke. He traveled quietly, careful to avoid the patrols of alien machines that scanned the ground with beams of light. At dawn, he rested in the ruins of a farmhouse. From there he could see the distant city. Black ships hovered above it like giant predators, and flames rose from broken towers. The sight would have made most men turn away, but Ryan only tightened his grip on his rifle. He spoke softly to himself. One man is not enough to win a war. But one man can begin it. If I fall, others may rise. If I stand, hope will stand with me. As the sun rose higher, Ryan reached the outskirts of the city. The silence there was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of alien engines. Streets were littered with broken vehicles, fallen walls, and the belongings of people who had fled in haste. Shadows stretched across the ground, long and sharp, as if the city itself mourned its fate. Ryan moved carefully, searching for a path deeper inside. His heart beat fast, but his steps remained steady. He knew the queen was near, for the air itself seemed colder. The shadows were not natural, they moved as though alive, bending toward a single center. At last, he climbed to the top of a half-broken tower. From there he saw her. The alien vampire queen stood at the center of the city, her armor glowing faintly, her eyes bright like fire. Around her, her servants moved silently, gathering resources and destroying what little remained of human defenses. She did not look rushed or worried. She looked certain, as if nothing in the universe could threaten her. For a long moment, Ryan watched. He was one man against an enemy who had conquered worlds. Yet he felt no desire to turn back. Instead, a calm strength filled him. This was why he had stayed. This was why he had chosen to fight. He whispered, "You may have taken their courage, but you will not take mine." With that, Ryan descended from the tower and stepped into the streets of the ruined city. He was the lone warrior now, the last defender of Arden. Though the queen did not yet see him, their paths were destined to cross. The people of Arden had fled, believing no one could face her. But the truth was that one human still stood, and his choice would change everything. The city lay in ruins, silent and broken. Smoke drifted between the tall towers, and the once busy streets were now filled with rubble. In the middle of this destruction stood the alien vampire queen. She moved with grace, her armor shining faintly in the dim light, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the stones. Around her, her followers carried out her will. Strange machines floated in the air, scanning the remains of buildings. Soldiers from other conquered worlds marched in silence, guarding her every step. Ryan watched from the edge of a collapsed wall. His rifle rested in his hands, but he did not fire. He studied her carefully, noting how her presence seemed to darken the very air. He could feel her power pressing down on him like a heavy weight. His heartbeat grew faster, and for a moment fear crept into his mind. But then he remembered why he had come. If he ran now, he would be no different from the rest. The queen lifted her gaze, and for the first time, her eyes turned toward him. She had not heard his steps, nor had she needed to. It was as if she could sense his will, his refusal to kneel. Her lips curled into a faint smile, a smile that carried both amusement and disdain. To her, he was only a single human, unimportant and weak. Yet she paused, for very few had dared to stand before her without trembling. "You are bold to remain," her voice echoed across the street. It was deep and calm, but filled with a strange coldness that made the shadows quiver. "Do you think one man can stop me?" Ryan did not answer at first. He stepped out from behind the wall and stood in the open. The wind carried ash across the ground, and his figure looked small against the backdrop of ruined towers and alien ships. Yet his stance was steady, his eyes unshaken. "I don't know if one man can stop you," he said finally. "But I know one man can try." The queen tilted her head slightly, as though curious. Her soldiers moved forward, ready to strike him down, but she raised her hand, stopping them. She wanted to see what made this human different. She had conquered countless worlds, and in each one, entire armies had fallen without resistance. But here, a single warrior stood alone. Ryan lifted his rifle and fired. The shot rang through the ruins, striking against the queen's armor. The energy sparkled, but it did not pierce. She laughed softly, her voice carrying like a whisper of death. "Your weapons are useless," she said. "Your courage is wasted." Still, Ryan did not lower his weapon. He moved quickly, firing again, not aiming at her but at the ground near her feet. Dust and smoke rose, covering her sight for a brief moment. Using that cover, he dashed across the street, rolling behind another broken wall. He was not fighting only with strength but with strategy. The queen's laughter faded into silence. She watched his movements with sharp eyes. He was fast, but more importantly, he was clever. Unlike other warriors who rushed blindly to their deaths, this human used his surroundings. From her perspective, the outcome was certain. Yet, for the first time in many years, she felt a spark of interest. Ryan set a small explosive near the base of a collapsed tower and drew the Queen's attention again with another shot. She moved toward him, her steps silent but heavy with power. Just as she neared, the charge detonated. The tower shook and fell, crashing down between them. The ground trembled, and dust filled the air. For a moment, Ryan caught his breath. His chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes stayed sharp. The Queen stepped through the dust, unharmed, yet her amusement had faded. "You think traps can hold me?" she asked. Ryan gripped his blade tightly. "I think you can bleed like anyone else." The Queen's eyes glowed brighter. With a sudden movement, faster than lightning, she appeared before him. Her strike came swift, and Ryan barely raised his blade in time. The clash echoed through the street, sparks flying where metal met energy. The force pushed him back, his boots dragging across the ground. His arms ached, but he did not fall. She struck again, and again he blocked. His blade shook, his breath grew heavy, but still he stood. Each moment he survived was a victory. Each second he resisted made her power feel less absolute. The battle had only just begun, but already something had changed. The Queen no longer saw him as a faceless human. She saw him as a challenge, small yet unbroken. As the dust settled around them, the ruined city became their battlefield. Alien machines hovered silently above, soldiers stood frozen in disbelief, and the fate of Arden seemed to hang on the clash between one queen and one lone warrior. Ryan's hands trembled with effort, but his voice was steady. "I may fall today, but I will not run. And as long as one of us stands, humanity will never bow to you." The Queen's cold smile returned, but it was thinner than before. For the first time, she faced not fear but defiance. The ruined city shook as Ryan faced the alien vampire queen. Around them, broken towers stood like silent witnesses. Ash drifted in the air, and the ground was littered with the remains of human defenses. Above, the dark fleet hovered, waiting for their queen's command. Ryan's blade trembled in his hands, but his stance was firm. Across from him, the queen moved with calm elegance. Her eyes glowed, and her armor shimmered as if made of shadows. She looked at him not with fear but with curiosity. Few had dared to face her. None had lasted this long. The Queen raised her hand, and the air grew heavier. The shadows stretched and wrapped around her like armor. With a swift motion, she struck again. Ryan blocked with his blade, the clash ringing out across the empty streets. The force of her blow pushed him back, his boots dragging through the dust, but he stayed on his feet. "You are strong for a human," she said, her voice cold. "But strength will not save you." Ryan steadied his breath. "I don't fight with strength alone." With those words, he moved quickly, not toward her but around her. He fired his rifle at the ground, kicking up dust and smoke. Then he darted into a narrow street between two broken buildings. The Queen followed, her movements graceful but slower in the confined space. Ryan had chosen the ground carefully. The collapsed walls made it harder for her to strike at full speed. Every corner and broken beam gave him a chance to dodge. He leapt over rubble, slid under fallen beams, and turned the ruins into a battlefield he understood. The Queen struck again, her claws slicing through stone. Walls cracked and collapsed, sending rocks crashing to the ground. Ryan slipped through the chaos, rolling to safety and setting another small explosive behind him. When she advanced, the charge detonated, sending flames upward. She stepped through without harm, but her pace slowed. Her eyes narrowed. "You waste time. Delay changes nothing." But Ryan knew every second mattered. He was not only fighting to win. He was fighting to prove that humans could resist. Every moment he stood against her was proof that her fear was not absolute. He climbed a half-broken tower, using the height to his advantage. From above, he fired down at her, aiming not to kill but to distract. Sparks lit the air as his bullets struck her armor. She raised her hand and sent a wave of force upward, shaking the tower. Ryan leapt across to the next building just as the structure collapsed behind him. The battle moved through the city like a storm. The Queen chased him, striking with power that split the ground, while Ryan led her through traps and narrow paths. He used fallen beams, shattered glass, and fire to slow her steps. He knew he could not overpower her, but he could outthink her. The alien soldiers and machines that surrounded the battlefield stayed silent. None dared to interfere. They watched in disbelief as a single human forced their queen into a fight longer than any they had seen before. To them, she was untouchable, yet here she was, locked in a battle with one warrior who refused to fall. At one point, the queen caught him off guard. She moved with sudden speed, striking his side and sending him crashing into a wall. Pain shot through his body, and his blade nearly slipped from his hand. For a moment, darkness clouded his vision. But as he staggered to his feet, he remembered the faces of the people who had fled. He remembered the promise he had made to himself, that he would not run. He tightened his grip and stood tall once more. "I am not finished," he said through heavy breaths. The queen tilted her head. Her smile had faded. She no longer looked amused. She looked challenged. The battle continued. Ryan fought with every ounce of will he had. He set traps, timed his strikes, and forced her to waste energy. She struck with power that could crush stone, yet each time he slipped away, using the ruins as his shield. He was a warrior not of brute force but of human resilience and cleverness. At last, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, both stood in the center of the ruined square. Ryan's body was tired, his clothes torn, his weapon scratched. The queen's armor glowed dimmer than before, and her eyes no longer carried the same easy confidence. "You surprise me, human," she said slowly. "You stand when all others kneel. You resist when all others flee. But you cannot win." Ryan raised his blade again. His arms shook, but his eyes were steady. "Maybe I cannot win today. But as long as I fight, you cannot claim victory." For the first time in centuries, the queen felt something she had almost forgotten, resistance that did not break. The battle was not yet decided, but the war for Arden had truly begun. The ruined square was quiet except for the sound of heavy breaths. Ryan stood with his blade in hand, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. Across from him, the alien vampire queen stood tall, her armor glowing faintly. The shadows around her flickered as if alive, reaching across the broken stones. The soldiers who served her watched from the edges of the battlefield. They had expected the human to fall long ago, yet he still stood. The queen had crushed armies and destroyed fleets in less time than this. Now she faced only one man, and somehow the battle was not finished. The queen raised her hand again, and the air grew cold. Her eyes glowed with a fiery light as she spoke. "You fight with courage, but courage cannot save you. Fear is the truth of all life, and I am fear itself." Ryan's body ached, but his spirit did not bend. He steadied his breath and tightened his grip on the blade. "Fear may be real," he answered, "but it does not rule me." The queen struck with sudden speed, faster than before. Her claws cut through the air, shattering stone where he had stood moments earlier. Ryan rolled across the ground, sparks flying as her power grazed his armor. He leapt back to his feet and swung his blade, forcing her to step aside. The clash continued, her strikes powerful and precise, his movements desperate but clever. Yet as the fight went on, Ryan began to notice something. Each time he blocked, each time he resisted, her strikes grew a little weaker. Her movements, though still swift, carried less weight. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But then he saw it clearly. Her power seemed tied to the fear she spread. When armies trembled, she was unstoppable. When crowds fled, her strength grew like a storm. But here, in this battle, she faced a man who did not surrender to fear. And with every moment he stood against her, the glow of her armor dimmed. Ryan's heart pounded as he realized the truth. Her greatest weapon was not her claws or her speed. It was fear itself. If he did not give in, if he refused to kneel, then her strength could be broken. The queen sensed his discovery. Her eyes narrowed, and her voice grew sharp. Do not think your defiance changes anything. I am eternal. You are dust. But her words no longer cut as deep. Ryan lifted his blade higher, his voice steady. You are not eternal. You are only as strong as the fear you create. Without it, you are no greater than I am. For the first time, the queen hesitated. Her strike slowed, and her soldiers at the edge of the battlefield shifted uneasily. They had never seen her pause. Ryan pressed forward. He struck not only with his blade but with his spirit. Each step he took was an act of defiance, each swing a refusal to bend. He shouted as he fought, his voice carrying through the ruins. You will not break me. You will not break humanity. The queen lashed out with fury, yet her blows no longer shook the earth as before. The shadows that once moved like chains now wavered and faded. The soldiers who watched began to murmur. If one man could resist her, perhaps she was not invincible after all. Ryan's chest burned with exhaustion, but hope filled his heart. He fought with renewed strength, striking again and again. His blade sparked against her armor, and though it did not pierce deeply, the force of his will struck harder than any weapon. The queen's eyes blazed with anger. She had ruled for centuries without challenge, yet here a human warrior had shaken her confidence. She roared, sending a wave of dark energy crashing through the square. Buildings cracked and crumbled, dust rose into the air, and the ground split beneath them. Ryan was thrown back, his body slamming into a broken wall. Pain surged through him, but he forced himself to rise. His legs shook, his hands trembled, yet he stood tall once more. He spat dust from his mouth and raised his blade again. I am still here, he said firmly. And I will always stand. The queen stepped closer, her expression no longer calm but fierce. She struck again, and Ryan blocked with every ounce of strength he had left. Their clash sent sparks into the dark air, echoing across the ruins. But this time, it was not only a battle of weapons. It was a battle of will. The turning point had come. Ryan had seen through her power, and she knew it. She was no longer the untouchable queen of fear. She was a fighter locked in a struggle she could not easily win. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared and night spread across Arden, the battlefield glowed with fire and shadow. The queen and the lone warrior stood locked in combat, yet the balance had shifted. For the first time in countless years, the queen felt doubt. And for the first time in the war for Arden, humanity felt hope. The city of Arden was silent except for the sounds of battle. Dust and smoke filled the streets, and broken buildings surrounded the lone warrior. Ryan's body ached from the long fight. His blade was scratched, his armor battered, and his lungs burned with every breath. Yet he stood tall, facing the alien vampire queen whose eyes glowed like molten fire. For centuries, she had conquered worlds without resistance. Entire species had fallen in days, their leaders crushed, their armies destroyed. But now, she faced one human who refused to yield. And for the first time, she felt uncertainty. Ryan's mind raced. He knew he could not match her in raw power. She was faster, stronger, and more experienced. Yet he had discovered her secret, her strength depended on fear. She fed on it, thrived on it, and grew powerful as others trembled. But he did not fear her. He refused to give her the one thing that could make her unstoppable. The queen struck first, her claws slicing through the air with deadly precision. Ryan blocked, sparks flying where blade met armor. The force pushed him backward, but he stayed on his feet. He dodged another strike and rolled behind a fallen wall. Every movement was calculated, every second a test of endurance and courage. Ryan's eyes scanned the battlefield. He saw the ruins, the shattered streets, and the empty sky. This was the place where the people of Arden had fled, believing hope was gone. He whispered to himself, "I will not let them be wrong. Humanity will not fall today." He set a small explosive near a collapsed tower and threw his blade toward the queen. The blast went off as she moved, shaking the ground and sending debris into the air. For a moment, she stepped back, her focus broken. Ryan took the chance and ran toward her, using the chaos of rubble and fire as cover. The queen recovered quickly, her expression no longer amused but sharp with anger. She moved with incredible speed, her shadow stretching across the ground. Her strikes were deadly, yet Ryan used his agility to avoid her. He jumped over fallen beams, slid under broken walls, and ducked past fires. Each move was a test of skill and courage, and each moment chipped away at her certainty. "You persist," the queen said, her voice cold. "You are foolish, human. No one survives me." "I survive because I stand," Ryan replied. "And I fight because I refuse to run." For hours, the battle continued. The alien vampire queen struck with all her power, shaking the city with every blow. Ryan blocked, dodged, and attacked when he could. Though he was tired and wounded, he never gave in to fear. Every strike he avoided, every trap he set, weakened her control. Finally, Ryan reached the base of the tower where the queen had first appeared. He had prepared a final explosive, crafted carefully from the materials he had scavenged. With a deep breath, he activated it and threw himself toward the queen. The blast shook the ground and sent fire and stone flying in all directions. The queen tried to move, but the explosion caught her off balance. Dust and smoke filled the air. For the first time, she was not completely in control. Ryan saw his chance and leapt forward, striking with his blade at her armor. Sparks flew, and the queen stumbled, the confidence in her eyes faltering. She roared, a sound that shook the city, but it was no longer the roar of invincibility. It was the roar of one who realized defeat could come. Ryan pressed forward with all his remaining strength, using not only weapons but willpower. He would not stop, he could not stop, for the fate of Arden depended on him. With one final strike, Ryan drove his blade into the structure supporting the queen. The tower shook violently, and debris collapsed around her. The blast buried her beneath rubble, fire, and smoke. The city trembled, and the alien fleet hovering above retreated, sensing their queen had been defeated. Silence fell over Arden. The fires burned lower, the wind carried ash across the streets, and the people who had fled returned cautiously. They saw the ruins but also saw one figure standing in the center of it all. Ryan was tired, bruised, and covered in dust, but he had not fallen. He had faced the alien vampire queen alone and survived. News of his victory spread across the planet. Humans everywhere heard the story of the lone warrior who refused to run, the man who had stood when everyone else had fled. He had shown that courage, intelligence, and determination could overcome even the greatest threat. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy learned a lesson the Queen had never expected. Humans were not creatures to be crushed by fear. They could stand, resist, and triumph against impossible odds. Ryan looked at the ruins, at the empty streets, and at the people returning home. He felt pride, not for himself, but for what humanity could do. One human had faced a queen, but all humans could now carry hope. The battle was over, but the story of Arden would live forever. One human had stood, and because of that, the people of Arden would rebuild. The humans of the galaxy would remember that courage could never be destroyed and that no enemy, no matter how powerful, could take away the human spirit. And so, Ryan, the lone warrior, became a symbol. A reminder that when all others run, even one human can stand and change the fate of the world.